lot of people talk about validating startup ideas, and I think this gets thrown around a lot, and it's hard for people to know what it really means. It means a lot of different things to different people. For our purposes and my definition of it, and what I think is going to be most valuable to you, is you want to think about validating a startup idea as gathering compelling evidence that your startup idea is promising before fully investing. Okay, let me break that out in a couple parts. You want to gather compelling evidence, which is typically like real world stuff. Do people sign up for it? Will people pay for it? That kind of evidence. It shouldn't be something that is like your mom thought it was a good idea. Moms around the world, not trying to throw any shade, nothing wrong with that, but not really unbiased. And so you want to find some compelling evidence, and you want to find out if your startup idea is promising. What I mean by promising is you're not going to know if it's $1 billion idea. So any notion that you're going to validate a startup idea and know whether it's $1 billion idea, it doesn't happen. You just want to figure out whether it's promising enough for you to potentially quit your job, spend months or years of your life working on it, potentially put some of your own money into it. So validating a startup idea, to me specifically, gather compelling evidence that your startup idea is promising before fully investing. Basically, I quit your job. I alluded to this earlier. There's no rule or test. I know a lot of times when I talk to people about this, they're like, oh, okay, how many users do I need? How much revenue do I need? Like, if I work on it for this time, if this investor says that it's a good idea, that means the idea is promising. There's no such thing. There's no set of users, there's no revenue. If I think your idea is promising, that doesn't necessarily mean it's promising. There's no rules here. And I wish there was, and I wish I could tell you what there was. I'm not like keeping secrets from you. There just isn't. And if you think about this a little bit, it's obvious that there isn't. Just think about if there was a rule, if there was like one test that you could do to find out if an idea was promising or not. Being a founder would be way easier, borderline trivial, and being an investor would be even easier and trivial, because we could all just run the test and we'd be like, oh yeah, that one passes the thing. Okay, cool. Let's all put our money in and we're all gonna be rich and startups are gonna be super successful. And that's just not the case. You know, famously, startups fail at kind of an alarming rate. And a lot of the reason why is because part of the process is figuring out whether the idea is promising. And even if it looks promising, you still got to do it to kind of like find out if that's the case. Maybe a surprising thing for people is I've been fortunate enough to kind of know some founders who have started kind of billion-dollar companies, including my partner, Brian, at Iterative. I think I've talked to all of those founders while they were building those companies. They didn't know that the idea was going to be $1 billion idea, honestly, in their heart of hearts, until it became $1 billion idea. And when it did become $1 billion idea, the number of them that would kind of like talk to me afterwards and be like, I can't believe this thing actually worked, is very real. There's no test to find out if your idea is promising. And for a lot of people where it ends up the idea is very promising, they don't know until it actually kind of is. And so the best we can do is we want to put in some work now to figure out as much as we can about whether it's promising kind of upfront. Okay, the final part here, and I think this is actually the most important piece. There's no rule, there's no test, and you're not trying to convince anybody else when validating an idea except for you. Validating a startup idea is not for investors. It's not for convincing your parents. It's not convincing your friends. It's to convince yourself that this idea is worth working on and potentially quitting your job and making that investment. That's it. And ultimately, that's an opinion that you're going to have. Again, there's no test and there's no rules. So you have to kind of do this work so that you can figure out whether you're like, okay, I really think this is a good idea. I'm going to spend my time to work on it. So ultimately, it's your decision. You are not validating startup ideas for anybody else. You're the one that kind of makes the decision. You're the one that is taking the risk. And so this is for you. And you want to be able to convince yourself of that. This is kind of how we kind of set up what validating a startup idea is.